to come into the room before I get started. I'm Scott English. I'm the Executive Director of the American Philatelic Society. Joining me is Shaun McMurtrie, who is our Education Director. We're going to talk a little bit about our plans for education and learning without limits. And I want to thank you all for being with us today. We're going to start with a quick overview of what we're looking at doing. And from there, we're going to talk a little bit more in detail. That's where Shaun steps in. He'll keep telling you he's the new guy right now. He's been here for about 5 or 6 weeks. We're very happy to have him on board. Believe it or not, I actually found an APS member who lived in the Bellefonte area with an education background. And so we're happy to have him here. So just a little bit about my background. Before coming to the American Philatelic Society, I was the Chief Operating Officer at the South Carolina Department of Education. One of the policy initiatives that I worked on, both prior to that in the governor's office, creating the legislation, and then in the implementation phase at the Department of Education, was virtual learning. What we did is we created a supplemental education program where we could take children who were in public school settings and give them access to a quality teacher when they weren't necessarily able to have one in a classroom in that neck of the woods. Now, at the time, there was a total of about 660,000 students in the public school arena. And when I came to the Department of Education 4 years after our virtual learning program was authorized, we only had about 7,000 students. What I did is I reshaped and transformed the office so that we could reach a broader audience. And it taught me a lot of lessons that I brought to the American Philatelic Society. By the time that I left the Department of Education 4 years later, we were serving 50,000 students. And so for me, what I learned is the power of leveraging technology in order to reach a broader audience. Now, bear in mind, this was 9 years ago. So we're really at a place today where I think there's a lot more comfort with using technology. And what I've had to do is convince the philatelic world that it's time to sort of let go of our old traditions and think a little more broadly about the way that we deliver education, because I want to achieve a couple of different objectives, which I'll cover with you now. So first, a little bit about the American Philatelic Society, for those of you who aren't necessarily familiar with it. The American Philatelic Society, located in the United States, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting the study and collection of stamps and postal history. We were founded in 1886, and we're one of the largest philatelic societies in the world, with nearly 25,000 members. We aim to provide educational resources, support research, and foster a sense of community among stamp collectors. I think there's often a perception that the American Philatelic Society is, because it's located in the United States, is only about U.S. philately and U.S.-based philately. Fact is we have members in over 110 countries, and I know that there are some international members who are joining us for this talk today. We have a very broad reach, and my objective selfishly is to make it even broader. We have a large presence in North America, but we also have a presence in Europe, in Asia, and also in Africa and South America. We're very proud of our international reach. And like I said, we want to make that even broader as time moves on. For me, I think education is probably one of the chief ways of doing that. So I always like to loosen things up a little bit with a quote. Seth Godin is one of these marketing geniuses. And, when I came to the American Philatelic Society, I asked very simply a lot of folks, why would you join the APS? And they started listing off different services that we offered. And what I realized is that we really lost our focus on why the American Philatelic Society began back in 1886, and why we exist as a philatelic community. And so I use this quote to sort of highlight the importance of what is really where we really should be focused when we're talking about philately, not just to each other, but also to non-collectors. People do not buy goods and services; they buy relations, stories, and magic. And as triter as that might sound, the reality is, when I'm talking to non-collectors, I have a series of stories, and I'm going to share one with you today, that really emphasize the power and the impact of philately, not just as a simple hobby, but really as a way of transforming people and making their lives matter that much more. So let's talk a little bit about learning without limits. One of the chief boundaries, I think, for a lot of people is their ability to be at a designated place at a designated time in order to learn something. And the rest of the world has figured this out and has started embracing this much more quickly than we have. But I want to talk about why we're bringing this to philately in a much more aggressive way today than we were in the past. So, one, we want to be able to expand our educational opportunities. We want to offer diverse courses and resources to cater to different learning styles and interests. One of the challenges I think that we have is for traditional collectors who've been around the hobby for a long time. They had a mentor, they had a stamp club, they may have even had a teacher in school that taught them a lot about the foundations and the fundamentals of collecting. We know today that same infrastructure just does not exist. You can't walk into a brick and mortar store and sit down and talk to a dealer and let them teach you a little bit about how to handle stamps and how you want to mount them and where you can even buy them. These types of things now have to be addressed in a different way, and we believe the APS has a responsibility to step up and do that. It has to be inclusive and accessible learning. Now, this is important, and again, when I get to our story about Stephen Campbell, you'll understand a little bit more. We want to take away all of the barriers that we can and provide an accessible learning opportunity for everyone out there. And access isn't just about physical capabilities. It's not just about physical location. It's about creating a sense of welcome. It takes one person to turn a collector away, and it takes a lot of collectors to bring them in. And so the reason why I want to do this is because I think this can be a unifying force for us to teach that next generation. If I look at the demographics of active organized philately, what I realize is they're predominantly old. Now, it hasn't always been that way, but I think we've tuned out a little bit too much some of the modern technology and not how it challenges our hobby, but rather how it can be assisting our hobby. We want to foster a love for philately. Now, that might be a little different than it was in the past. Again, more traditional collectors lived in the pre internet world, and so geography and art were exposed to them through stamps. Now, we all know that you can access that on a phone, but there are many other reasons to love philately today. We're preserving the history of individual people from around the world, and I think it's incredibly important for us to think differently about why people should love stamp collecting today. And that includes making it more experiential, if you can believe that, and taking them to those locations where these stamps are honoring, or helping them connect with the people that are being honored on the stamps, or reconnecting them with a culture where their family may have come from, but they're not a part of anymore. Finally, we want to do collaborations and partnerships. I was in California this past weekend and was speaking to our friends at the Royal Philatelic Society of London, to the UPU, and a number of other international groups, as well as groups in the United States. The platform that we're talking about building is an open door for anyone to promote their brand of collecting, whether it's a specialization, whether it's topical collecting. It doesn't matter to us. We want to be the unifiers, not the controllers of the information that goes out there. We want to create a simple and understandable place where people can walk in, feel welcome, and understand more about the area of collecting that they're interested in. And so we want to make sure that we're nurturing and that we are a community and not simply just about the APS. I have to be transparent and tell you, I think there's a benefit for the APS by doing this. But I also think that because we're a very large collecting organization with a huge global reach, that we have an obligation to put this out there. And that's why I've gone out and solicited financing to help build this initiative. So let's look a little bit about our history. And though we've made progress on this, I really think there's a lot more work we need to do. But if you look at the work that we've done over the last few years, it's really been about testing and understanding where we're needed, what we need to do, and how we can deliver those services more importantly. Back in 2020, when the pandemic hit and a lot of folks were locked at home, they were staying in place. Stamp clubs were not meeting as frequently. We built a lot of different virtual programs to help people remain connected in the hobby. The interesting thing is I noticed a lot of people who maybe just a couple of years before very proudly told me that they avoided the internet or used a flip phone. But by the time the pandemic hit, they became not just reliant on technology, but actually came to appreciate the benefits that it provides for you. Now, listen, I want to be clear about something. There's no way to suggest that online learning or online communities is a replacement for in person. What I think they are, though, is both a gateway, an open door, and an opportunity to build a network around the world. I profiled a collector in March who was born and raised in Hungary. He escaped from Nazi Germany or from the Nazis in 1945. Once the war was over with, he came to the United States, but he remained a Hungarian collector, and so he remained connected to the community. But here's the thing you have to note. He was 100 years old. He was 99 when I interviewed him, and he insisted, and I was impressed by this, by using Zoom. And he quite adeptly logged on. He used Zoom, and I thought, my gosh, if Bob can do this, no one else has an excuse. But in the course of that conversation, what he told me was that the power of the internet and Zoom for him, and he said, I never could have imagined this in a million years when I was a young man, is that it's helped him remain connected, maybe even more so and more frequently than he was to Hungary back when he was young enough to travel back and forth to the country. And so I think we've got to keep that in mind when we're talking about digital and online learning, is that it does have power to it. You can't ignore it. So let me tell you about Stephen Campbell. Steve joined the APS in 1990. He was a member of the Owensboro Stamp Club, and he was a regular summer seminar participant. When he was a young man, he was a student at the University of Kentucky studying geology, and he had a very bright future in front of him. In his senior year, he was on a trip to Colorado doing field work in geology and was in an automobile accident with a number of his classmates. Two of his classmates passed away, and Steve suffered severe brain trauma. This basically altered the course of his life. Although he was able to get back a sense of normalcy, he was never able to get into the field where he wanted to be in geology, but he never let that get in his way. The remarkable thing, though, is that he was not a stamp collector before the accident, but casually he was a stamp collector, but he used stamps as part of his therapy. Whether it was the color varieties and helping to identify colors, it was looking at the stamps in order to recognize language, to verbalize things, to to using the stamps as a dexterity test so that he could get things back again. This man had to relearn every part of his life, from talking to thinking to seeing to using his hands and his physical strength. And stamp collecting was a central part of doing that. Now, I've got a million of these stories, but I think it's pretty remarkable that Steve was able to live a very simple life and a very good life after this accident, despite the fact that he suffered from severe brain trauma. He met his wife not long after that. And if you watched, we have a video where we interview Karen. She said that she met her husband when she was in her first year of teaching in Kentucky. And what a remarkable coincidence is that the day that President Reagan was shot in 1981 is the day that Karen lost her first teaching job, and Steve proposed to her. They subsequently got married. They raised a daughter, and Karen was a lifelong educator in special ed. Even so, during the pandemic, she was in the Czech Republic while Steve was still in Kentucky. Now, they remained connected. He would travel over there and she would travel home. But what she did admit to me is that his collection sort of grew out of control while she wasn't in the house. And that was something that she had to deal with after his passing last year. When Karen came up to visit us, because she'd been here numerous times, she's from the area, and she'd brought Steve to the APS on more than one occasion for summer seminar, for a Mr. Rogers ceremony we did back in 2018, to just general visits when she was up to see family on the holidays. And she came up to visit me, and she wanted to find some way to honor Steve. So we talked through a couple of different issues, including me talking about learning without limits. Because of Steve's personal experience and his passion for education, he was a substitute teacher back in Kentucky, and Karen was a lifelong educator. Education became very important to him because Karen was education to him, and he loved her. And so he wanted to always push people to support the APS, participate in our education programs, and he always tried to get the club to come up here and visit, and they kept putting it off. And so in the course of that conversation, we realized a couple of different things. Number one is Steve's legacy was he wanted people to come to the APS, and by God, if they're not going to come to the APS, well, then we're going to bring it to them. Two is he really valued education as a tool, particularly, I think, because of his personal experience. And so it's been important for us to be able to figure out the appropriate way to honor Steve. And so we found that through a very generous contribution from Steve's estate and from Karen, who will not just be a donor, but she will be a partner in this project. And she and Shaun, both educators, share a passion and a language. And I think it's fantastic that we've got the two of them working together. And so we've created the Stephen Campbell Home of Online Learning. The acronym, of course, is for school. Karen insisted that we call it Stamp School because she wanted to make sure that people recognized that this was going to be more than just about Stephen, but a rather what he cared about, what he had a passion for, and that she wanted to make sure that people connected those two things together always. And I think it's a very appropriate way for us to honor Steve in this program. So let's talk a little bit about the details of it. We have three target audiences that we want to look at. When we're talking about beginners, we want to emphasize the new and young collectors. If we look at the traditional age of a collector, we have a heavy weight of over 60 collectors, and we want to be able to broaden that out. We want to look at millennials, and we want to look at Zoomers who are now getting into, getting out of college, getting into life, and who are starting to develop themselves as adults. And part of that is, giving them a reason to be a little bit more interested in stamp collecting. So we know that gamifying is the way that it's called in the education space, where we create micro-credentials, we create certificates, badges, things like that. The idea is that we create very foundational pieces of education about stamp collecting and give them access to it, help them understand it, and then test them on it for their proficiency so that they can feel like they're making progress, that they're learning, because that's right. That's the lack of feedback can be one of those isolating things about being a new collector that we want to address, and giving them a way to understand that they're making progress, that they're learning more. And so we're working on that now. We're developing. Shaun's doing a lot of development of what the curriculum would look like, how that would be tested, all of those things. It's a very intensive job, although I will tell you that in the past month and a half, Shaun's made a lot of progress there, and I was impressed. He outlined some of that for us yesterday in our meeting, and he'll talk a little bit about it now. But I'm impressed by the degree to which we've moved forward already. We're going to talk about communal learning. This is something that's been incredibly important to the hobby, and I don't think it should go away. This is aimed primarily at intermediate collectors. I think one of the challenges we have today with the information that we deliver is that sometimes it's a little too highly specialized. And what we want to do is look at a little bit more of a general topic area we can talk about, whether it's a country, whether it's a specific era within a country, but not really digging down into the weeds as deeply as some of us do as collectors. And we all have that habit if you collect long enough. We want to make it group learning that can be done online, that can also be done in person, where we deal with problem solving and networking. And we want to make sure that it is perpetual. That is, after the class is over with, we still want that community to remain connected, and we want to facilitate that either through chat rooms or forum discussions or meetups at stamp shows, those sorts of things. We want to be a part of not just educating them, but also building these communities and making them feel welcome, connected, and remain connected long after the class is over with. Finally, I think we've got to focus on outreach and community. One of the things that um, is astounding to people who are not collectors today is that it's not just a bunch of folks hunched over stamp albums or hiding in a very, dark room so that no one knows they're collecting stamps, but rather that there's a very rich history, that there are a lot of great stories to be told, and that there's a lot of practical advantages to knowing and being a stamp collector. We just had a session earlier today where Wayne Youngblood talked about counterfeits. That's something that impacts more than collectors. It impacts anyone who uses the mail. And so we have an obligation not to look inward to talk to each other, but to look outward. And so part of what we want to be able to do is help empower our members and collectors to be able to go out there and not just be proud of their hobby, but explain to people why they should be in it too. And those are places where I think we fall short today. And, I believe we can overcome those things. That's why I want to do this. So what are the benefits of online learning? We all know the benefits of in-person learning, and some of us have powerful emotional connections to them, and we should. But we also need to think about what are the benefits of online learning. So 82% of student satisfaction. Flexibility is a very important one, particularly when you're looking at young collectors who have lives, they have careers going on right now. They are finishing college, they're starting families. Any number of things can get in the way. Flexibility matters to them. When you create date specific, time specific, geographic specific events, you're giving them a lot of barriers to work around in order to get to the information. And so if we can eliminate those barriers, if we can give them a more cost-effective program, we can let them personalize their education and create better access. And that's really been the hallmark of where the APS has been over the last few years, is further creating further accessibility within the organization by giving you access to this online, by creating tools that you can use in order to do research at home. And now we want to do the same thing with education. Now, I wouldn't do a presentation if there wasn't a call to action. So let's talk a little bit about that. What are the things you can do? Volunteer. This is first and foremost. I've raised $100,000 from for the naming rights of the platform. In connection with that, I'm doing a fundraiser in Hartford, Connecticut. And so if there's anybody here who feels inspired to support this mission financially, please reach out to me. Um, but I need your talent as much as I need your treasures. And so I think the first thing that we need to talk about is this is going to take a village. I hate to use a cliche like that, but it's going to be a lot of work. Shaun is but one man, and there's only so much he alone can accomplish. And he's going to be critical in leading this effort, but he's going to need people to work with him to do that. So we're going to need collectors who can help us shape the curriculum. They can be beta testers for our platform. They can be evaluators of the curriculum that we're putting together, the programs that we're putting together, the courses that, the questions that we're asking. And they can also be educators. And I mean, it doesn't matter what your level of expertise is, you can help. And so you do have to jot down Shaun's email address when this is over with and reach out to him and tell him how you can help make that happen. Contribute educational resources. Again, Shaun's building the infrastructure, the curriculum for this, but it's going to require support through creating materials that are going to be engaging, educational, and keep people moving along and help them learn more. Transfer of knowledge is the challenge, but you are for the subject matter experts out there, the more work you can help us do in your specific subject areas, the better off we're going to be. I mean, sponsor local events. You can think locally about this and impact globally. We can do workshops, we can have collecting events, you can do exhibits in your area, and people say, oh, I do those and no one shows up. Persistence is the most important thing. You cannot just simply do it once and think, if you didn't succeed, then therefore it was a failure. That's patently untrue. What I've learned in life is I'm going to make a lot of mistakes before I do something right. And I have made a lot of mistakes before I've done something right. And that's going to be true of anything that we attempt, but it's really worth doing. And you'd be amazed. So again, it goes back to you don't know what's going to happen until you do it. And once you start making those connections, you'll start making more connections, and it has a growth potential to it. So don't be shy, don't be hesitant. You can impact your collecting community locally just as well as you can globally. Donate stamps. My gosh, I never have enough stamps. I used to think that I did, but we always want to connect stamps with the proper home. And what I worry about is sometimes people just think, oh, I'll just throw them in the trash or they're on paper. That is patently not necessary. There is always a value to a stamp, believe it or not. Whether it's been used, whether it's on paper, it doesn't matter, because in order to teach people about collecting, you want to give them starter stamps. You don't want them to go out and have to spend lots of money on a collection. It's not until you know more. And I always encourage people who are starting out, buy used, buy cheap while you're learning about the stamps, and then you're able to go out there and start making those investments. But the worst thing you could do is make a $200 decision today when you don't have enough knowledge to know if you're making the right decision. Be an advocate. I never get tired of saying this. If you're ashamed of being a stamp collector, shame on you. That is a beautiful hobby. I came here voluntarily. I came here as a non-collector because I was impressed and I feel like I see the potential for collecting every day and making sure that we can help people. There's a lot of things out there that divide us in this world, but the amazing thing about stamp collecting is it doesn't matter what your background is, what your, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's racial, it does not matter. It has been the most unifying thing ever. Well, until you get into a discussion about centering and color variety, but you know what I mean. I mean, it's generally a positive experience for people, and I want to make sure that we're doing all we can do in order for people to see that. So our mission and our pledge is this: through Learning Without Limits, we're going to aim to enter the global philatel community as a knowledge resource for collectors of all skills and backgrounds. We are committed to removing barriers to collectors worldwide and providing a united hobby to preserve the hobby and the personal history entrusted to us. And I don't want to say questions yet, so I'm going to take that off. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Now I want to introduce Shaun McMurtrie, who joined the APS in February of this year. Is that right? February or March?
It was March.
March. God, time flies when you're having fun. But Shaun has an impressive background doing his undergraduate and graduate work at Penn State University. And he has a doctoral in education leadership from Harvard University. You can tell people this stuff yourself. I'm not going to do it for you. You can introduce yourself. But so give them a little bit about your background, Shaun, and then if you can, provide a little bit of detail on how you've been digging into this and where you're taking things.
Sure, can do. Thanks, Scott. First of all, I want to let you all know that we are monitoring the Q&A and chat sessions. So if you see me looking over here or Scott looking, please put any questions you have about what Scott has presented or what I'm about to share with you, and we'll get those questions answered at the end, or if they come up, we'll do that. Like as Scott said, I am a lifelong educator. So I started off as a math teacher for the local high school, moved to a district administration, and then I decided to go and get my doctorate. Came back and I worked at Penn State, supervising student teachers and supporting them, so like the next generation. And then found this job. And the interesting thing is I've been collecting stamps since I was 8 years old. So unlike some of the other people who have come into stamp collecting because they work here, I kind of was drawn here because I already knew the APS was here, and I've been stamp collecting. It's one of my passions. So that brought me to where I'm at and meeting the entire APS crew here. And one of the things that I've always known about the APS is I am super fortunate to be right here. So I live a mile away. And if you're from overseas, things are a lot closer. And here geographically, we're very separated. So I've always had this great opportunity to be at the APS anytime I wanted. I can walk here from my home, but we have people in California that are thousands of miles away. And how do we reach them? How do they come here? How do we keep it from being cost prohibitive for them to benefit from the APRL, the American Philatelic Research Library that we have, or to be able to come to summer seminar or other things like that? And online is one of the great ways that we can connect people, not only in our country, but across the globe, to share this knowledge base. Our greatest asset that we have is our 25,000 philatelists. They're our members. They hold all of this knowledge that we can share with one another to grow and expand and get more people invested. So I really wanted to leverage all of them in this process. So when I came, one of the first things I had to do is go through everything that we have. And I haven't even come close to scratching the surface on going through all of the content that we have available to us, whether it's recordings that we have, talks, exhibitions, the entire library that's right next door to my office. We have this great knowledge base. But I always want to start with the end in mind. So I wanted to think about, where do we want to end up? And I took my curriculum background and said, well, here in the US, we have standards for everything that we do. Anything in education, K through 12, it has a standard with it. And what do you have to meet? What do we want our students to be able to do at the end? And I said, what do we want a philatelist to be? What skills do we want them to have? What practices do we want them to do? So I've spent the last few weeks coming up with actually what I think is the first group of philatelic standards or practices, to take somebody from that beginner standpoint of just walking in, never being a stamp collector, going through the basics of what are tongs or tweezers, how do you soak a stamp, what do I collect, what's a first day cover, what is a stamp, all the way from those basics to the more advanced topics. So what is tagging? So if you looked at Wayne Youngblood's presentation earlier, he talked about tagging, and I kind of consider that something more advanced in the collecting world. And so how do I take somebody through all of those things to get them there? So I have all of the standards and practices right now. And so like Scott already mentioned, like one of the practices being an advocate for philately. And that's something we want to ingrain in all new collectors. And so that's a practice that I want to instill in everybody and would be a through line throughout all the things that we do. So my idea currently, and I need feedback and help from our members and other philatelists out there, is to create what I keep calling the flagship course of our online learning, which would be kind of like a diploma program where somebody could start in the beginning course, whether they're a beginner as an adult or a beginner youth. I would differentiate those just because the way that a young person learns versus an adult. Take them through beginning philately, then offer a course on intermediate philately, taking all of that knowledge base and growing a little bit further, and then moving on to more advanced and some specialized. So enabling kind of like when you go to college and you pick a major, you'd pick an emphasis area that like you're really interested in. Maybe you loved cancellations. And so you would take some of our more specialized courses that we have on cancellations specifically and align that with some of the last advanced topics that we have that everybody would take. And in the end, you would get a certificate as a philatelist. The APS would recognize you taking this course. So there would be that option, but there would also be the option that people could just take smaller chunks of courses. So they could just take a course on cancellations because they want to know more, and we would have a group of courses that align with that. So a lot of those courses, as Scott was saying earlier, they could be synchronous or asynchronous, meaning there could be times that people meet and talk online like we are today, or it could be asynchronous where you take it at whatever time. So as you know, we're working here and it's like after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and over in Europe, you're after 6 o'clock at night. And so sometimes those things don't align if we want to have a worldwide impact. And so having those asynchronous courses allow everybody to participate, even if it's an online community. And one of the things that I would say we don't do well here at the APS currently that we're trying to expand is having that more online community feel so that people can come and get questions answered. Like if you're working in your collection, you're like, oh, I really would love somebody to like weigh in on this stamp. Is it the variety that I think it is? Who could I ask? You could come to this community and say, I'm looking at this stamp. What are your opinions on it? Like, help talk through this. And there'd be somebody there that might be able to answer that within, a couple of days. So doing that. So I would love to develop courses that have an in-person feel. So people can still come here to Central Pennsylvania and Bellefonte and visit the APS and see the history that we have here and connect in person, but then have these asynchronous and synchronous community pieces, and just a completely asynchronous presentation style, just to get information and have that available too. So a really diverse group of offerings, some of which would be paid opportunities, some of which would be totally free, because we want to, share our knowledge. We don't want to be completely selfish about it. Even though we need to be sustainable about what we're doing, some of that knowledge should be shared globally to get people interested. And then some of the more, particular advanced things would be paid opportunities for people to do. So that's currently what I've been working on. That's what I can do in about 6 weeks of being here. So I've been thinking about it a lot, and welcome feedback and questions. But I will put another plea out there. The one thing that I need people to help me develop and teach these courses. So I know a lot about philately just from my personal experience. There's a lot of things I don't know and could learn. I have no background in exhibiting, for example, or going to stamp shows. I'll be going to GAS this summer for the first time, but those things, like, I don't have experience in. I can't teach those. I need experts out there that will help me develop those courses and be able to teach them. So if you are ever interested in offering a course or teaching for the APS, please just reach out to me, talk to me. I would be happy to develop something along with you. But let me see here if we have any questions that I can answer.
So
So go ahead,
yeah,
Scott.
I was gonna say the first question that came out, and I addressed this in my column in May for the American Philatels, but I want to address it here since I see a couple of folks uh, who are longtime participants of summer seminar. The question is, will this be replacing the longtime tradition of stamp camp? Which is, if you've seen the video, I really encourage folks to go to our YouTube page and see the testimonial from Karen Campbell talking about Steve's experiences with summer seminar. She called it stamp camp, and he corrected her every time she did that. And but some folks call it stamp camp, some folks call it summer seminar. What I address is that we had to put a stop to summer seminar because there's a very intensive project going on here. And summer seminar is a wonderful experience, but it there were two challenges I had with it. Number one was bandwidth of the staff. Most people, even those who participate in the program, didn't realize the amount of work that would go into setting up and preparing for summer seminar. It's not that we didn't value doing it, but it does take us away from being able to focus on this primary mission that we've been financed for. And so I had to take a pause this year on it. I can't guarantee right now that it'll be back in 2025, but I have a much more expansive view that I want to share with people about what in-person learning can look like. That includes and is not limited to bringing people to the American Philatelic Society in Bellefonte and doing education sessions here. But I also want to partner with other groups and go to other parts of the country so that if Bellefonte is too hard, too expensive, or what have you, but there are places where someone can go and participate in a learning project in partnership with some of our other philatelic societies out there. I want that to be a part of it too. The other issue was that we continued to sort of whittle away at the benefits of being here. That is, we were being very cost conscious about how much it would cost someone who was traveling here, what they would have to pay out of pocket to be here and stay here for a week, plus all of the activities that would be associated with that, because a lot of that's underwritten by tuition. And so I wanted to be able to rethink that from everything from whether or not we could get sponsorships for it so that we could offset the cost to how we would structure the program so that we could have that socialization piece be valuable as well as the education piece, because we wanted to hit on both of those, I think, with equal tone. And so we'll work through those issues in at the same time, because this is not the death of in person. And I want to emphasize that. I've read this over and again. Folks have just sort of interpreted that this is what it means, but it's not the death of in-person education opportunities. It is thinking differently about the way that we're going to approach them. Um, Here's a question for you, Shaun. With your certificate program, will you offer credit for courses taken in the past?
I would say this goes in education all the time. It depends on how different the requirements would be for one to the other. So if you're ever like in a college course and they totally redo the curriculum and like, oh, you have to redo that because it's been updated so much, it's actually kind of a different course. That would be my quick answer to that one. It would just totally depend on the course. One of the other questions that I see in the chat is somebody asked, are we looking, I guess it was Evan, if I pronounced that correctly, are other stamp communities in other countries have tried something similar, and are you looking at that? So I have looked at some of the other things that other countries are doing. One of the things that I have done is we have the American Numismatic Association. So looking at other organizations that do similar things, and I've actually talked to them and their ed director, And they have revamped and just redid their entire curriculum in a similar fashion that we would like to. And so I was in touch with Christian, who's in charge there. And we were actually on the same page before I even talked to her or saw what she was doing. But she's a fellow educator and somebody also that has a curriculum background. So it kind of wasn't surprising that we were on the same page, but we are well aligned with what they are just doing. And so I think that's also encouraging for us.
One of the things I see here in the chat section is that there's another group exploring this. I want to use the digital library as an example of how collaboration and partnerships can work more effectively than everyone sort of trying to do their own thing. I've long been a critic of everybody needing to have their piece of the pie rather than recognizing the value that you can contribute and distribute if it's done in a concerted effort. So let's use the digital library as an example. When we first started out with this, every association said, there's no way in the world we're going to give you our journal to host because it's a member benefit that we rely on, and because people can access it, or we can limit access and encourage people to join, then they will we want to be able to have complete control over that. In the intervening 5 years, we've worked with societies, we've worked both national and internationally to discuss, to think through what does this look like. So now we have a growing library. We have permissions to put journals from over 60 societies today into the digital library. And so we're working our way through that. But what's important about that is that we become a singular promoter of the hobby. And we're working, we have a digital librarian on staff now, and he's been here for the last 4 months. Looking at the user experience and how we create it as a more leveraged promotion opportunity for societies out there, respecting their wishes. And so we want to do exactly the same thing with the education platform. And that is, I have no bias towards what you collect. I have my own personal collection, and that's focused on Cuba, and First Day, but I want people to collect anything they want in any way that they want. And guess what? You're not going to be unique. No matter what you collect in this world, somebody else collects it too. And the better we can do it, building that community and making it as large as possible, and really taking some of the financial burden and time restraints off of other organizations and using ours as a easier way to deliver both the substance and the content, and the expertise that your society brings, I think we can leverage that opportunity. So I want to emphasize that quite a bit. Um, are
So
you going to develop? Are you going to develop a library of courses? Are you promising to save the old ones? This has been part of. I mean, this has been an exciting part of listening to Shaun talk about what he's been working on.
I mean, yes. So I am going to develop library courses. And this will also address, I think, Warren's question a little bit. So even though we're doing the certificate program, we have all of this knowledge that we already have. And so sometimes I want to take those things that we have and basically repackage them. Meaning, so taking something that's an hour-long presentation and breaking it up so that it has an educational piece, like maybe something you need to read or like a test or something, giving a part of that presentation or video, expanding upon it and doing it. So some of those pieces that we're going to have, we'll create brand new courses from. Other ones where that might not be possible or just doesn't work very well, we would still have all of that content available too. Whether that's going to be a paid course, unpaid course, you know, I don't know at this time, but yes, all the content that we have is still going to be saved and available elsewhere. And so for all of those, for Warren's question, all of those advanced collectors, a lot of the content that we have is very specialized because it comes from like summer seminar. And so that a lot of those courses are for a lot of the advanced collectors. As a new collector, I can't imagine you would take a course on the Washington Franklin series as the very, very first thing that you do. Be a little bit overwhelming and, cost prohibitive for a lot of beginning collectors. And so like that type of course would be something that I'm thinking in a more advanced collector would probably be interested in. The problem is everybody is so precise in what they collect that getting a course for everybody requires that the experts that are out there are sharing their content and creating the courses to share with others who are interested in that. So hopefully that answers both of those questions all at once.
So there's a question here that says, if you're developing a certificate or diploma program, is there a potential to limit interest of new hobbyists, and how do you accommodate long-term collectors? Shaun, I'm going to take this first, and then I want you to chime in after that. I'll start with this, and that is, as I said in my comments, one of the issues that we recognize is that the very foundational education that people have, and I mean, before you even talk about what you collect, how you collect it is incredibly important. We were having a meeting here, and we've got several young people on staff, and I said, well, we should be teaching people about perfs. And they corrected me and said, no, we have to teach people how to even buy stamps. That's the biggest question we get. And so I think they're right. They educated me in that, we do have to look at the very foundational piece. That's what Shaun's working on right now. We're not biased towards a certain collection, but I also think that it's a challenge upon all of us to say, well, let's make sure that we have a seat at that table to make sure that we're offering the most diverse opportunities we can to lure collectors into our collecting interest. I want it to be selfish for everybody. There's got to be a what's in it for me for every society out there that's participating. I wouldn't ask the American Topical Association to do a talk on education, but not to promote topical collecting in any way, shape, or form. So I want everybody to be here. It's when you start getting into the highly specialized side of things, though, that's where we've got to start connecting them with people who have that knowledge. And in terms of servicing, more experienced collectors, I said this at the onset of this back in October when I introduced this concept to our membership and to the board. What I said is, when we start looking at advanced collectors, it's not as much about what they can learn, but what they can teach. And so that's, again, my challenge to everybody out there who is a more advanced collector. I did a stamp chat in March with Harold Krish, who had done a presentation on the topic. It was the Japanese prisoner of war camps during World War One. And, he came back and said, oh, I can do this again. And I said, let's look at it in a different way. And he said, challenge accepted. He went off, and when he came back, he did a marvelous presentation. Simple promotion for our stamp chat if you want to go see it on our YouTube page. But it was a marvelous presentation where he basically took material that he's had for years, rethought it, looked at it again with a different lens, and put together an absolutely amazing presentation. But he took that challenge up, and he said, I learned more about my collection putting this together. And that's true of educators. They can learn as much putting a presentation together as they can by sitting in a course. So I want more experienced collectors to be educators and mentors and people who are guiding the next generation through the process. But I guarantee you this, you'll learn while you're doing it.
Yeah, one of the things Scott said earlier too is really true, that a lot of us, that myself included. So if you read my column in the American Philatelist this month, you'll know that my dad got me into stamp collecting because he did it with his dad when he was younger. Now, my dad didn't collect when he was older. He just did it as a kid for a couple of years, and he went in the attic one day and was like, I found this collection. Are you interested? And I was like, oh, tell me more about it. And he got me started, and I kind of took off, and he's like, whoa, Shaun, like, slow down. You've passed me. But you have that person that's around you that does that. So being connected with somebody, if it's not going to be somebody in your family or somebody geographically close to you, having a mentor that you can contact who is online, who is like your online pen pal, basically, to talk about philately, to talk about your interests and things like that. Some of those advanced collectors out there, I'm counting on to be those mentors, help those people, because that's the one piece, is the people piece isn't missing from this. A lot of people think like online is very cold and you can't connect with people, but having those opportunities where you have a mentor, you have somebody that you can contact, and talking to them on video, it's not quite the same as in person, but you can still form really close friendships and connections that way. And we want to be able to facilitate that. So that's something else that our advanced collectors and our people who are educators and mentors can also do as part of this.
So I want to get to the comment section. There was a specific question in there about whether or not our online platform is going to replace C3A. And yes, I mean, that's fundamentally how we're going to start this. The process Shaun and I are going through right now that we're not talking about too much is looking at the technology that we'll use to deliver this. We appreciated what C3A brought in terms of introducing online education to our community, but we see greater potential out there, and we don't think this platform's ever going to offer it to us in the way that other platforms will. And so, Shaun and Kent Ball, who is on our team as he's the applications director for the APS, and Shaun and Kent share an office, so they can talk to each other all day long about technology being leveraged in education. But we're also going through this process now of evaluating the platform so that we can bring something that has a better user experience than C3A. That is, I think, will be a more seamless implementation process for you and for us to be able to deliver those quality education opportunities. And I think take off some of the limitations that have been somewhat frustrating to us over the last few years.
So Suzanne's had a question in the question and answer for quite a while. What part of the platform curriculum are you most excited about? I'm most excited about getting people in to use it. So once we have all this developed, getting people together in classes. As a teacher, my favorite thing is to see the aha moment. The moment when somebody is like, oh, I realized something, like I've learned something, I've grown. And watching that happen in a virtual space is just as rewarding to me as seeing that aha moment. So I'm looking forward to actually getting to a point where we've got students in these classes and loving stamp collecting, just learning about something that they are falling in love with. That's what I'm looking forward to.
For me, it's the community aspect of this because that's the piece that when you go to summer seminar, what makes it so powerful for people when they have that experience is that they come and they meet new people or they reconnect with people they haven't seen since last year at summer seminar and or the educators that are out there. What I want to do though is I want to take that experience and not make it a June event every year, but rather something that happens throughout the year and is something that other people can join in on if they're not able to come to summer seminar. So I want to spread what happens at summer seminar beyond the folks that are here. And so for me, I think it's incredibly exciting that we're going to finally be able to facilitate an online community that can keep momentum going for people who feel a real buzz after summer seminar and keep it going so that they're hyped for the next one.
So I see no more questions or nothing in the chat. Does anybody have any last minute questions? Are we saving the C3A courses? Yes, in the sense that the content will all be saved. Like I said earlier, some of them will be repackaged into similar courses that are like have a little bit more educational component, so versus a presentation component. Other ones may be able to just be put on the new LMS, which is the learning management system, and delivered as they are. So it's going to be on a course by course basis, but we're not deleting anything. Like it will still exist here. Since we're really into our digital library, this is all part of like digital resources that we actually want to save and preserve. So if not something that we're going to offer in the future, it's something that we need to definitely preserve.
There is, and I did touch on this a little bit, but I did see a question about mentorship in here in terms of what role is that going to play, and I did emphasize that, but I'll take the risk of repeating myself on this one because I think what I need to emphasize more than anything is that it's absolutely critical that this is a team effort. Our community has since 1886 has been remarkable about rallying around and providing education. We formed an education committee in the APS in 1907, and Henry Mudge, who was at that time was the vice president of our board, who became the president of our board in 1909, was the driving force behind that. But the idea of that committee was to take the best and brightest of APS membership around the country and have them encourage learning through stamps, both at the school level as well as in the communities, write letters to the editor, write columns for their local paper. And, though we have a professional staff, it's not, it doesn't matter what service we provide. It is for members by members. And so I really want to emphasize the importance of that and, really reconnecting that old mentor program a little bit and um, talk about connecting people again and letting them serve as mentors, but again, doing it in some way that's easy for both the mentor and the mentee to remain connected. And hopefully in time, they'll be able to get together at a stamp show or at a learning event or something like that. But we want to keep this going throughout the year. It's got to be 365. And that's a standard that I've set for this. And that's where we're going to drive this. We had a lot of great questions today and a lot of great comments. I see a lot of familiar names. I would say faces, but I can't see yours in the attendee list. So I really do appreciate having both our old friends and our new friends here together to talk in detail about the education platform. It's going to be very exciting. I'm grateful to have Shaun here because he does have that collector sensibility and does understand what it takes to learn both as an educator, but also as a stamp collector. And I can tell you he is not a shrinking violet inside of our building. So any of you who work with him, you'll find him to be as refreshing as I do. And so I'm really grateful for that. And
Thanks,
just
Scott. You're too
remember,
nice to me.
and just remember, if you're interested in supporting it, Shaun's got his email address in the chat. I can also put my email address in the chat. And most members know how to reach out to me. Believe me, I know, and communicate with me. And I love hearing from our members, no matter how you send the message, whether you call me, write me, email me. I'm always going to respond back in kind. So I like writing letters, and I have plenty of stamps. But otherwise, if this is, we promised an hour, so we'll stick to the hour unless there's something more. We're happy to call it quits. But I can't thank everybody enough for being here today. And this is really just the beginning of where we're taking this. So thank you all, and it was great seeing you.